Mustard. Hi, this is Stream 2. My name is Carl. Sliced bread with the title. I'm gonna start today by reading. Already cleaned up a bit. So my next step is reading. This is Stream 2 of fixing myself, trying to get less stimulated. On the other side, I have a YouTube window open, which is videos and stimulation. So day 2 of reducing my stimulation. Let's go. All right. This book I'm reading, How the Mind Works, because of how, say, socially anxious I am, and because of how socially anxious let me change my accent back to my Nigerian one. Because of how socially anxious I am, and how I say robotic, monotone, robotic, that's the word. Feel like I'm trying to study human emotions, and which I do feel human emotions. I do feel, but when I'm outside with people around me, it's like I turn that part off. Like I am just too conscious about doing anything wrong that the part of my brain where it's reads human emotions is able to read and just like, think on the go, be able to like work. It just turns off. That's what anxiety does. Everybody does that. So after a while of noticing that, trying to fix it by reading and improving my skills, improving my knowledge, keeping my brain active, interactive, because of anxiety. I switch back to my fake accent. Because of anxiety, I just shut myself off from the world. I won't say I really did that. I just shut myself off. Like the solution is going outside, interacting, always interacting. But once I get a bad reaction or it doesn't go well or something just doesn't go quite right, I just tell myself, you know what? This is why you stay alone. This is why you should go back and hide. You should retreat and hide, and you should be alone and you'll be able to avoid these situations. You won't have to confront any situation if you go back and hide. And most of the time, that's what I do. That's what I did since I've been here so far. I'm trying to push myself, but after graduation and I came back home, I haven't just pushed myself at all. Even like my last semester there, I wanted to push myself. Well, I was trying to put it on my friends, but now I'm by myself and I have no one to try to push me, no one right beside me to push me, and I don't reach out to people that much. It got worse. It got worse. When my brain thinks and I respond to things and just retrieve words, I have to say wait a couple minutes, a couple seconds, or like actually think thoroughly through something before I could open my mouth. And thinking on the spot is something that I wasn't good at before, but with isolation and not going outside and just keeping to myself, not talking, not training this muscle of my mouth. I know my brain has all the words, it has the everything in there, but when it transmitted down to my mouth is just like the muscles haven't been trained. They don't have experience with, say, communicating my thoughts. So they are like it's the words that are coming out are just sometimes are nonsense, sometimes are mispronounced, sometimes it's like I have the word there, then I'm about to say it, and six other words just appear in front of me, and boom, I lose the first letter of the word I was about to say, and I lose the whole word. No, lose the whole word. Also, I noticed that my fake accent that helps, I'll say, Americans get me a bit better. It is also a problem. Problem being not trained enough. So when I speak, I blunder some words, switch to my Nigerian accent. Then, since the pronunciation wasn't right, I switch back and I'm apologizing. So the way I speak is just it becomes a cluster of nonsense. Becomes a cluster of nonsense. And also I've been dealing with a bit of, say, depression from this, being alone, being able only to talk to your friends or the one friend I have. I have a couple friends, I'm just joking. Uh, through the phone. I'm not too much of a communicative person, so I talk to them once in a while. Then when the whole small talk, or I this let me see, let me see. There's a comment I saw in a video the other day that clearly stated how I feel when I'm in conversations that require small talk, or if I'm at work and I just have to pass away time anytime, like there's just nothing going on, or just small talk in general. It's like my brain doesn't work that way. The comment was just like, when it comes to small talk or comes to non-productive or non-important things to talk about that doesn't have to do with, I'll say, action or something to do, they're like drawn to blank. Their brain just goes blank. That's the exact same way I am when I just step outside with people there. If it's not something that is in front of us, I would have to think and work on it. If it's not something like, I'll say, I say important. Important is not the word, but it's not something that is. Hmm, it's not a. I'm thinking. I'm looking for that word. Something that is crucial. Crucial is not a word. Serious. Let me just use the word serious. If it's not something that is serious, like mature kind of serious, then there's no room in my head to even think about how to add to the conversation or be myself. I just stay generic shit or keep quiet and look like a fucking, oh, sorry for the F bomb, and look like I'm just there. I'm just in the background. And I always try to be in the background. Always try to be in the background. Well, that's one hell of a long ass intro. So let's start. How the Mind Works by Steven Pinker. And forgive my reading. It's just like my speech. There's a lot of gaps. Takes a while for me to process words. But I do know with time and training, which that's what reading kind of is, a way training the brain. My vocabulary will expand. My pronunciations will improve. And what I'm trying to say, this is a phase. This is a phase. Rattle on too much. That's another thing I do. Procrastination too. All right. So, How the Mind Works by Steven Pinker. Pinker? Yeah, Pinker. It could be Stephen Pink Eye. Uh, The content. mm, 8 chapters. And the first chapter is about 50 pages. Beautiful. First page, standard equipment. First chapter. Standard equipment. Right there, so many robots in fiction, but none in real life. I would pay a lot for a robot that could put away the dishes or run simple errands, but I will not have the opportunity in this century, and probably not in the next one either. There are, of course, robots that weld or spray paint on assembly lines and that roll through laboratory hallways. My question is about the machines that walk, talk, and see and think, often better than their human masters. Since 1920, Krell Kapek, when Krell Kapek coined the word robot in his play RUR, dramatists have freely conjured them. Dramatists have freely conjured them up. Speedy, Cutie, and Dave in Isaac Asimov's I Robots. In Isaac Asimov's I Robots, Robbie in Forbidden Planets, the flailing canister in the Lost in Space. Oh, phew. Prediction. My brain sees some words and just like throws them out there before I could actually like read it. Just I predict what I'm seeing instead of just actually reading what I'm seeing. I predict what the word it's that's weird. A flailing canisters in Lost in Space, the Daleks in Doctor Who, Rosie's in the maid in Rosie the maid in the Jetson, Nomad in Star Trek, Hyman in Get Smart, the vacant butler and Pickering and Bickering Haberdasher. Bickering Haberdasher in Sleeper, R2D2 and C3PO in Star Wars, the Terminator in the Terminator, Lieutenant Commander Data in Star Trek, The Next Generation, and the wisecracking film critics in Mystery Science Theater 3000. This book is not about robots. It is about the human mind. It's about the human mind. I will try to explain what the mind is, where it came from, and how it lets us see things, and how it lets us see, think, feel, interact, and pursue higher callings like art, religion, philosophy. On the way I will try to throw light to distinctly human quirks. Why do memories fade? How does makeup change the look of a face? Why do ethics stereotype where do ethics stereotypes come from, and when are they irrational? Why do people lose their tempers? What makes children bratty? Why do fools fall in love? What makes us laugh? And why do people believe in ghosts and spirits? Hmm. But the gap between robots in imagination and in reality is my starting point. Is my starting point. For it shows the first step we must take in knowing ourselves, appreciating the fantastically complex design behind feats of mental life we take for granted. Complex design behind the feats of mental life we take for granted. The reason there are no human-like robots is that well, the reason there are no human-like robots is not that the idea of a mechanical mind is misguided. It is that the engineering problem that we humans solve as we see and walk and plan and make it through the day are far more challenging than landing on the moon or, or sequencing the human genome. Nature once again has found ingenious solutions that human engineers can't yet duplicate. When Hamlet says, "What's a piece of art is a man? What a piece of work is a man? How noble in reason? How noble? Wait, what the fuck? How no? Oh, excuse me. How noble in reason? How infinite in faculty, in form and moving? How express and admirable?" I don't know what that means. What a piece of work is a man? How noble is in reason? How infinite in faculty, in form and moving? How express and admirable? We should direct our all not as Shakespeare or Mozart or Einstein or Karim Abdul-Jabbar, but at a 4-year-old carrying out a request to put a toy on a shelf. In a well-designed system, the components are black boxes that perform their function as if by magic. That is no less true of the mind. That is no less true of the mind. The faculty with which we ponder the world has no ability to peer inside itself or other faculties to see what makes them tick. That makes us the victim of an illusion that our own psychology comes from some divine force or mysterious essence or almighty principle. In the Jewish legend of the golem, a clay figure was animated when it was fed an inscription of the name of God. The archetype is echoed in many robot stories. The statue of Galatea, the statue of Galatea was brought to life by Venus. Answer, answer to Pi, Pi, uh, Malian, yeah, Pygmalion's prayers. Pinocchio was vivified by the blue fairies. Modern versions of the golem archetype appear in some of the less fun. Appears in some of the less fanciful stories of science. All of the human's psychology is said to be explained by a single omnipotent cause: a large brain, culture, language, socialization, learning, complexity, self-organization, neural network dynamics by a single omnipotent cause: a large brain, cultural, language, socialization, learning, complexity, self-organization, and neural network dynamics. I want to convince you that our mind are not animated by some godly vapor or single wonder principle. The mind, like the Apollo spacecraft, is designed to solve many engineering problems and thus is packed with high-tech systems, each contrived to overcome its own obstacle. I being by laying I being by laying out these problems, which are both design specs for a robot and the subject matter of psychology. For I believe that the discovery by cognitive science and artificial intelligence of the technological challenges overcome by our mundane mental activity is one of the greatest revelations of science. An awakening of the imaginations comparable to learning that the universe is made up of billions of galaxies, or that a drop of pond water teems with microscopic life. Hmm, Microscopic life. Microscope micro microscopic life. What does it take to build a robot? Let's put aside superhuman abilities like calculating planetary orbits and being with the simple human one seeing and being with the simple human, one seeing, walking, grasping, thinking about objects and people, and planning how to act. In movies, we are often shown a scene from a robot's eyes view. with the help of with the help of cinematic conventions like fisheye distortion or crosshairs, that is fine for us, the audience who already have functioning eyes and brains, but it is no help to the robots in art, to the robots in art. The robot does not house an audience of little people, someone calmly gazing at the picture and telling the robots what they are seeing. If you could see the world through a robot's eyes, it would look not like a movie picture decorated with crosshairs, but something like this. Numbers. So they show each number represents the brightness of one of the millions of tiny patches making up the visual field. The smaller number comes from dark patches. So the smaller numbers come from darker patches, the larger numbers come from brighter patches. The numbers shown in the array are the actual signals coming from an electronic camera trained on a person's hand. Electronic camera trained on a person's hand, though they could just as well be the firing rates of some of the nerve fibers coming from the eye to the brain as a person looks at a hand. For a robot brain or a human brain to recognize objects and not bump into them, it must crunch these numbers and guess what kind of objects in the world reflected the lights that gave rise to them. The problem is humbly, humblingly, humblingly, humbly, humblingly, humblingly difficult. Humblingly difficult. First, a visual system must locate where an object ends and the backdrop begins. But the world is not a coloring book with black outlines. But the world is not a coloring book with black outlines around solid regions. The world is the world as it is projected into our eyes is a mosaic of tiny tiny shaded patches. Perhaps one could guess the visual brain looks for regions where a quilt of large numbers, a brighter region about a quilt of small numbers, a darker region. You can discern such a boundary in the square of numbers. It runs diagonally from the top right to the bottom center. Most of the time, unfortunately, you would not have found the edge of an object where it gives way to empty space. The juxtaposition of a large and small number could of a large and small number could have uh, it could form many distinct arrangements of matter. This drawing, devised by the psychologists Pawan Sinha and Edward Adelson, appears to show a ring of light gray and dark gray tiles. Okay, so using light and darkness. Oh, what? Let's locate where an object ends and the backdrop begins. But the world is not a coloring book with black outlines around solid regions. The world, as it is projected in our eyes, is a mosaic of tiny shaded patches. Perhaps one could guess the visual brain looks for regions where a quote of large numbers, a brighter region about. Okay. So it's processing and robots, cameras processes images, pixel and uh, brightness of settings. It's an interesting concept. In fact, it is a rectangle cut out in a black cover through which you are looking at part of a scene, through which you are looking at part of a scene, and the next drawing, the cover has been removed, and you can see that each pair of side-by-side gray squares come from a different arrangement of objects. Big numbers next to a small number can come from an object standing in front of another object. Dark paper lying on light paper, a surface painted two shades of gray, two objects touching side by side, gray cellophane on a white page, an inside or outside corner where two walls meet, or a shade or a shadow. Somehow the brain must solve the chicken and egg problem of identifying three-dimensional objects from the patches on the retina and determining what each patch is: shadow or paint, crease or overlay, clear or opaque. From knowledge of what object the patch is part of, the difficulties have just begun. Knowing what the object is part of it. The difficulties have just begun. Once we have carved the visual world into objects, we need to know what they are made of. Say snow versus coal. At first glance, the problem looks simple. If large numbers come from bright regions and small numbers come from dark regions, then large numbers equal white equals snow, and small numbers equals black equals coal. Right? Wrong. The amount of light hitting a spot on the retina depends not only on how pale or dark the object is, but also on how brim or dim the light illuminating the object is. A photographer's light meter would show you that more light bounces off of a lump of coal outside than off of a snowball inside. That is why people so often disappointed. That's why people so often disappointed by their snapshots, and why photography is such a complicated craft. The camera does not lie. Left to its own devices, it renders out the Left to its own devices, it render outdoor scenes as milk and indoor scenes as mud. Photographers and simple microchips inside the cameras coax a realistic image out of the film with tricks like adjusting shutter timing, lens apertures, film speeds, flashes, and darkroom manipulations. Our vision, our visual system does much better somehow. It lets us see the bright outdoor cool as dark and the dark inside snowball as white. Let me read that again. No, that was more full prediction. That's what that is. Kind of predicting and summarizing. Oh, just say predicting. Our visual system does much better. Somehow it lets us see the bright outdoor coal as black and the dark indoor snowball as white. That is a happy outcome because our conscious sensation of color, the lightness matches the world as it is rather and world as it presents itself. Let me just read that again. That is a much happy outcome because our conscious sensation of light, of color and lightness matches the world as it is rather than the world as it presents itself. Matches the world as it is rather than matches the world as it is rather than the world as it presents itself to the eyes. color and light. Yes, matches the world as it is rather than as the world presents itself. The snowball is soft and wet and prone to melt, whether it is indoors or out. And we see it as white, whether it is indoors or out. The coal is always hard and dirty and prone to burn. And we always see it as black. The harmony between how the world looks and how the world is must be an achievement of neural wizardry, because black and whites don't simply announce themselves on the retina. In case you are still skeptical, here is an everyday demonstration. When a television set is off, the screen is a pale greenish green gray. When it is on, some of the phosphor dots give off light. Phosphor dots give off light, painting in the bright area of the picture, but the other dots do not suck light and paint in the dark area. They just stay gray. The area that you see as black are in fact just a pale shade of the picture tube. When the set was off, when the set was off, the blackness is a figment. And darkness is a figment, a product of the brain circuitry that ordinarily allows you to see coal as coal. Television engineers exploited that circuitry when they designed the screen. The next problem is seeing in depth. Our eye squashes the three-dimension world into a pair of two-dimension retina image is and the third dimension must be reconstituted by the brain, but there are no telltale signs in the patches on the retina that reveal how far away a surface is. A stamp in your palm can project the same square on your retina as a chair across the room, or a building miles away from drawing page, or a building miles away from or a building miles away. First drawing page 9. Let's see. It's really bad, guys. It's really. A cutting board viewed head-on can project the same trapezoid as various irregular shards held at a slant. Second drawing, page 9. You can feel the force of this fact of geometry. You can feel the force of this fact of geometry and of the neural mechanisms that cope with it by staring at a light bulb for a few seconds or looking at a camera as the flash goes off, which temporarily bleaches a patch onto your retina. If you now look at the page in front of you, the after image adheres to it and appears to be an inch, an inch or two across. An inch or two across. If you look up at the wall, the after image appears several feet long. If you look at the sky, it is the size of a cloud. If you look at the sky, it's the size of a cloud. Finally, how might a vision module recognize the objects out there in the world so that the robots can name them or recall what they do? Obvious solution is to build a template or cutouts for each object that duplicates its shape. Finally, how might a vision module recognize the objects out there in the world so that the robot can name them or recall what they do? The obvious solution is to build a template or cutouts for each object that duplicates a shape. that duplicates its shape. When an object appears, its projection on the retina would fit its own templates, like a round peg in a round hole. Round peg? What? Hey, like when an object appears, its projection on the retina would fit its own templates, like a round peg in a round hole. When an object appears, its projection on the retina would fit its own templates. Reconstituted by the brain. The, the third dimension might be correct, but there are no telltale signs in the patches on the retina that reveal how far away a surface is. A stamp in your palm projects the same square on the retina as a chair across the room or a building miles away. Miles away. Mhm. As a chair across the room or a building miles away. A cutting board viewed head-on can project the same trapezoid as trying to see if I can see any shape that would break this down a bit more. You can feel the force of this fact of geometry and the neural mechanisms that cope with it by staring at a light bulb for a few seconds or at a camera as the flash goes off. It temporarily glitches a patch onto your retina. If you now look at the page in front of you, the after image adheres to it that appears to be an inch. If you look at the sky, to the side of the sky, finally, motivation must recognize the objects out there in the world so that the robots can name them or recall what they do. Okay, so the audio answer is just, they said, just keep on feeding it with templates and pictures and examples of what the images are and the uses till it learns. That's how the LLMs are built. Yeah, the template will be labeled with the name of the shape in this case. The template will be labeled with the name of the shape in this case. The letter P and whether a shape matches it. The template announces the name. Alas, this simple device malfunction is both possible. Alas, this simple device malfunction in both possible ways. It sees P's that aren't there. For example, it gives a false alarm to the R shown in the first square. We give the false alarm to the R shown in the first square below, and it fails to see P's that are there, and it fails to see P's that are there. For example, it misses the letter when it is shifted, tilted, slanted, too far, too near, or too fancy. And these problems arise with a nice crisp letter of the alphabet's image of the alphabet. And these problems arise with a nice crisp letter of the alphabet. Imagine trying to design a recognizer for a shirt. Imagine trying to design a recognizer for a shirt or a face. To be sure, after 4 decades of research in artificial intelligence, the technology of shape recognition has improved. You may own software that scans in a page, recognizes the printing, converts it with reasonable accuracy to a file or bytes, but artificial shapes recognizers are still no match for the ones in our head. The artificial ones are designed for pristine, easy to recognize worlds and not the squishy jumble real world. The funny numbers at the bottom of the checks were carefully drafted and to have shapes that don't overlap and are printed with special equipment that position them exactly so that they can be recognized by templates. Oh, that's why that's like that. When the first face recognizers are installed in buildings to replace doormen, they will not only try to interpret mm, the Charocross, Kuros, Charo. Charocross. Chiaroscuro, chiaroscuro. Interpret the chiaroscuro of your face, but will scan it, but will scan in the hard edges, but will scan in the hard edge, rigid contours of your iris or your retinal blood vessels. Our brain, in contrast, keep a record of the shape of every face we know and every letter, animal, tool, and so on. And the record is somehow matched with a retinal image, even when the image is distorted in all the ways we have been examining. In chapter 4, we will explore how the brain accomplishes this magnificent feat. Let's take a look at another everyday miracle getting a body from place to place. Let's take a look at an everyday miracle getting a body from place to place. When we want a machine to move, the arrangements or treatment of light and dark parts in a pictorial work of art. Chiaroscuro, chiaroscuro. The arrangement or treatment of light and dark parts in a pictorial work of art creates the perception of depth in a two-dimensional work. Chiaroscuro, 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 chiaroscuro. So it gives a 3D perception to a 2D image, 3D perception to a 2D image. Let's share this cool. Getting a body from place to place. When we want a machine to move, we put it on wheels. When we want a machine to move, we put it on wheels. The invention of the wheel is often held up as as a proudest accomplishment of civilization. Many textbooks point out that no animal has evolved wheels and cities. The facts as an example of how evolution is often incapable of finding the optimal solution to an engineering problem. But it is not a good example at all. Even if nature could have evolved a moose on wheels, it surely would have opted not to. Wheels are good only in a world with roads and rails. They bog down in any terrain that is soft, slippery, steep, or uneven. Legs are better. Wheels have to roll along an unbroken supporting bridge, but legs can be placed on a series of separate footholds. An extreme example being a ladder. Legs can also be placed to maximize launching, lurching, maximize launching and to step over obstacles. Even today, when it seems as if the world has become a parking lot, only about half of the Earth's only about half of the Earth's land is acceptable to vehicles with wheels or tracks, but most of the Earth's land is accessible to vehicles with feet. But most of the Earth's land is accessible to vehicles with feet. Animals, the vehicles designed by natural selection, but legs come with a high price. The software to control them. A wheel merely by turning changes its points of support gradually and can bear weight the whole time. A leg has to change its points of support at one its support all at once. A leg has to change its points of support all at once, and the weight has to be unloaded to do so. The motor controls a leg. It's the motors controlling a leg have to alternate between keeping the foot on the ground while it bears and propels the load and taking the load off to make the leg free to move. All the while, they have to keep the center of gravity of the body within the polygon defined by the feet so the body doesn't topple over. The controllers also must minimize the wasteful up and down motion and is the bane of horseback riders. It's the bane of horseback riders. In walking wind up toys, these problems could be solved by a mechanical linkage that converts a rotating shaft into a stepping motion. But the toy cannot adjust to the terrain by finding the best foothold. Even if we solve these problems, we would have figured out only how to control a walking insect with 6 legs. An insect can always keep on tripod. An insect can always keep one tripod on the ground while it lifts the other tripod. At any instance, it is stable. At any instance, it is stable. Even four-leg beasts, when the ants moving too quickly, can keep a tripod on the ground at all times. Keep a tripod on the ground at all times. But as one engineer has put it, the upright, two-footed locomotion of the human being seems almost seems almost a recipe for disaster. Upright two-footed motor of a human being seems almost a recipe for disaster in itself and demands a remarkable control to make it practicable. Practicable. When we walk, we repeatedly tip over and break our fall in the nick of time. When we run, we take off in bursts of flight. These aerobatic movements used to plant our feet on widely or erratically spaced foothold. I would not prop us up at rest and to squeeze along narrow paths and jump over obstacles. But no one has yet figured out how we do it. Controlling an arm presents a new challenge. Grab the shades of an architect's lamp and move it along a straight diagonal path from near you, low on the left, from diagonal path, and low on the left. Controlling an arm presents a new challenge. And the shade of an architect's lamp and architect's lamp and move it along a straight diagonal path from near you, low on the left, too far from you, high on the right. Look at the rods and hinges as the lamp moves. Though the shade proceeds along a straight line, each rod swings through a complicated arc, swooping rapidly, at times remaining almost stationary at other times, sometimes reversing from a bending to a straightening motion. Now imagine having to do it in reverse without looking at the shade. You must choreograph the sequence of twists around each joint that would send the shade along a straight line. That would send the shade along a straight line. The trigonometry is frightfully complicated, but your arm is an architect lamp, and your brain effortlessly solves the equation every time you point. And if you have ever held an architect's lamp by its clamp, you will appreciate that the problem is even harder than what I have described. The lamp uh, flails under its weight as if it has a mind of its own. Mind of its own. So would your arm if your brain did not compensate for its weight, solving a near interactable physical problem. A still more remarkable feat is controlling the hand. Nearly 2,000 years ago, the Greek physician Galen pointed out that exquisite natural engineering behind the human hand. It is a single tool that manipulates objects of an astonishing range of size, shapes, and weights. From a log to a millet seed, handles them all. Malok to a military man handles them all. Galen noted as well as if he wait, Galen noted as well as noted as well as if his hand had been made for the sake of each of them. Had been made for the sake of each one of them. One of the things. The hand can be configured into a hook grip to lift a pail a scissors grip to handle a cigarette, a five-jaw chalk to lift a coaster, a three-jaw chalk to hold a pencil, a two-jaw pad to pad chalk to thread a needle, a two-jaw pad to side chalk to turn a key, a squeeze grip to hold a hammer, a disc grip to open a jar, and a spherical grip to handle a ball. Each grip needs a precise combination of muscle tensions that hold the hand into the right shape and keep it there as the load tries to bend it back. Think of lifting a milk carton too loose a grasp, too loose a grasp, and you drop it too tight and you crush it. And with some gentle rocking, you can even use the tugging on your fingertips as a gauge of how much milk is inside. And I won't even begin to talk about the tongue, a boneless water balloon controlled only to be squeezed, which can loosen food from a back tooth or perform the ballet that articulates words like thrilling and sixths. A common man marvels at uncommon things. A wise man marvels at the commonplace. Keeping Confucius dictum in mind, keeping Confucius, keeping Confucius dictum in mind, let's continue to look at commonplace human acts with the fresh eye of a robot designer seeking to duplicate them, pretend that we have we have somehow built a robot that can see and move. What will it do with what it sees? How should it decide how to act? An intelligent being cannot treat every object it sees as a unique entity unlike anything else in the universe. It has to put objects in categories so that it may apply its hard-won knowledge about similar objects encountered in the past to the object at hand. But whenever one tries to program a set of criteria to capture the members of a category, the category disintegrates, leaving aside slippery concepts like beauty or dialect, the dialectal, dialect, dialectal, dialectical materialism, beauty or dialectical materialism. Let's look at a textbook example of a well-defined one bachelor. A bachelor, of course, is simply of course, a simple right? Example of a well-defined one bachelor. A bachelor, of course, is simply an adult human male who has never been married. But now imagine that a friend asks you to invite some bachelors to her party. What would happen if you used the definition to describe which of the following people to invite? If you use the definition to decide which of the following people to invite. Otto has been living happily with Alice for the last 5 years. They have a 2-year-old daughter and have never officially married. Bruce was going to be drafted, so he agreed with his friend Barbara to have a justice of the peace marry them, so he would be exempt. They have never lived together. He dates a number of women and plans to have the marriage annulled as soon as he finds someone he wants to marry. Charlie is 17 years old. He lives at home with his parents and is in high school. David is 17 years old. He left home at 13 and started a small business and is now a successful young entrepreneur leading a playful lead, leading a playboy's lifestyle in his penthouse apartments. Eli and Edgar are homosexual lovers who have been living together for many years. Faisal is allowed by the law Faisal is allowed by the law of his native Abu Dhabi to have three wives. He currently has two and is interested in meeting another potential fiance. Father Gregory is the bishop of the Catholic Church of the Catholic Cathedral at um, Gorton upon Thames. The lists, which comes from the computer scientist Terry Winograd, shows that the straightforward definition of bachelor does not capture our intuitions about who fits the category. Knowing who is a bachelor is just common sense, but there is nothing common about common sense. Somehow, it must find its way a human or a robot brain. It must find its way into a human or a robot brain, and common sense is not simply an almanac. Not simply an almanac human. No, it's not simply an almanac human. Not simply an almanac about life that can be dedicated by that can be dictated by a teacher or downloaded like an enormous database. Could be dictated by a teacher or downloaded by an enormous database. No database could list all the facts we tactically know, and no one ever taught them to us. Mm, You know that when Ivan puts the dog in the car, it is no longer in the yard. When Edna goes to church, her head goes with her. If dog is in the house, he must have gone in through some opening, unless he was born there and never left. If Sheila is alive, yeah, it's crazy. But the training would be to shout for like 1 to 2 minutes. 1 to 2 minutes. Minutes. Would be to shout for 1 to 2 minutes each day, and that will help like train that muscle, and it will stop like I need to stop closing when I try to pronounce words, so I wouldn't be giving those like high pitch at 9 a.m. No, I am just reading to read. My understanding is either or. If Sheila is alive at 9 a.m. and is alive at 5 p.m., she was alive at noon. She was alive at noon. Zebra in the wild never wears underwear. Hey, zebras in the wild never wears underwear. Opening a jar of a new brand of peanuts butter. Opening a jar of a new brand of peanut butter will not vaporize the house. People never shove meat thermostats in their eyes. A gerbil is smaller than Mount Kilimanjaro. An intelligent system, then, cannot be stuffed with trillions of facts. It must be equipped with a small list of core truths and a set of rules to deduce their implications. But the rules of common sense, like the categories of common sense, are frustrating, hard to set down. Even the most straightforward ones fail to capture everyday reasoning. Mavis lives in Chicago and has a son named Fred, and Mills lives in Chicago and has a son named Fred. It's but whereas the Chicago that Mavis lives in is the same Chicago that Mills lives in. Okay. If lives in the Fred who is Mavis' son is not the same Fred who is Mills' son. If there's a bag in your car and a gallon of milk in the bag, there's a gallon of milk in your car. But if there is a person in your car and a gallon of blood in a person, it would be strange to conclude that here's a gallon of blood. That's funny. That is funny. That is a gallon of blood in your car. Even if you were to craft a set of rules that derived only sensible conclusions, it is not easy. It is no easy. It is no easy matter to use them or to guide behavior intelligently. Clearly, a thinker cannot apply just one rule at a time. Clearly, a thinker cannot just apply one rule at a time. A match gives light, a saw cuts wood, a locked door is opened with a key. But we laugh at the man who lights a match to peer into a fuel tank, who saw off the limb he is sitting on, or who locks his eyes in the car or who locks his keys in the car and spends the next hour wondering how to get his family out. A thinker has to compute not just the direct effects of an action, but the side effects of as well. But a thinker cannot crank out predictions about all the side effects. Either the philosopher Daniel Dennett asked us to imagine a robot designed to fetch a spare battery from a room that also contained a time bomb. Versions I saw that the battery was on a wagon and that it is pulled and that it is pulled the wagon it and that if it's pulled the wagon out of the room, the battery would come with it. Unfortunately, the bomb was also on the wagon, and the robot failed to deduce that pulling the wagon out brought the bomb out. So pulling the wagon out brought the bomb out too. Version 2 was programmed to consider all the side effects of its action. It had just finished computing that pulling the wagon would not change the color of the room's walls and was proving that the wheels would turn more revolutions than there are wheels on the wagon. But when the bomb went off, version 3 was when the bomb went off. Version 3 was programmed to distinguish between relevant implications and irrelevant ones. It sat there cranking out millions. It, it sat there cranking out millions of applications and putting all the relevant ones on a list of facts to consider, all the irrelevant ones on a list of facts to ignore. As the bomb ticked away, an intelligent being has to deduce the implications of what it knows, but only the relevant implications. Dennett points out that this requirement poses a deep problem not only for robot design but for epistemology. The analysis of how we know the problem escaped the notice of generations of philosophy, who were left complacent by the illustrious by the illusory effortlessness of their own common sense. Only when artificial intelligence only when artificial intelligence researchers try to duplicate common sense in computers, the ultimate blank slate, did the conundrum now called the frame problem come to light. Yet somehow we all solve the frame problem whenever we use our common sense. Imagine that we have somehow overcome these challenges and have a machine with sight, motor coordination, and common sense. Now we must figure out how the robot will put them to use. We have to give it motion. We have to give it motives. What should a robot do? The classic answer is Isaac Asimov's fundamental rules of robotics. The three rules that are built most deeply into a robot's positronic brain. So a robot's positronic brain. The robots may not injure a human being, but through interactions allow a human being to come to harm. A robot must obey orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. The robot must obey orders given it. Robots must obey orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. Asimov's insights Asimov's insights notice that self-preservation notice that self-preservation, that universal biological imperative, does not automatically emerge in a complex system. It has to be programmed in. In this case, as the third law, after all, it is just as easy to build a robot that lets itself go to ports or eliminates a malfunction by committing suicide as it is to build a robot that allows locks that allows that always looks out for number one. Perhaps easier. Robot makers sometimes watch in horror as their creation cheerfully shares off limbs or flattens themselves against walls, and proportion of the world's most intelligent machines are kamikaze cruise missiles and smart bombs. But the need for the other two laws is far from obvious. The two laws is far from obvious. Why give a robot an order to obey orders? Why aren't the original orders enough? Why command a robot not to do harm? Would it be easier never to command it to do harm in the first place? Does the universe contain a mysterious force pulling entities toward malevolence so that a post, positronic brain must be programmed to withstand it? Do intelligent beings inevitably develop an attitude problem? In this case, Asimov, like generations of thinkers, like all of us, was unable to step outside his own thought process and see them as artifacts of how minds were put together rather than as an inescapable law of the universe. Man's capacity for evil is never far from our minds, and it is easy to think that evil just comes along with intelligence as part of its very essence. It is a recurring theme in our cultural tradition. Adam and Eve eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge, uh, Promethean, Promethean fire, and Pandora's box, the rampaging golem, house bargaining, a fast bargain, house bargain, the sorcerer's apprentice, the adventure of Pinocchio, Frankenstein's monster, the murderous apes, and uh, Mutinous Hall of 2001, A Space Odyssey, of 2001, Space Odyssey, from the 1950s through the 1980s, countless films in the computer run amok. Countless films in the computer run amok genre capture the popular fear that the exotic mainframe of the era would get smarter and more powerful and someday turn on us. Now that computers really have become smarter and more powerful, the anxiety has won. The anxiety has won. Today's ubiquitous, 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 ubiquitous. Today's ubiquitous networked computer have an unprecedented ability to do mischief should they ever go to the bad, but the only mayhem comes from the unpredictable chaos or from human malice in the form of viruses. We no longer worry about electronic serial killers or subversive silicon cables becoming uh, subversive silicon cables because we are beginning to appreciate that the malevolence like vision, motor coordination, and common sense does not come free with computation but has to be programmed in. The computer running word perfect on your desk will continue to fill paragraphs for as long as it does anything at all. A software will not in A software will not insidiously mature into depravity like the picture of Dorian Gray. Even if it could, why would it want to get what's more floppy disk, control over the national railroad system, gratification of a desire to commit senseless violence against laser printer requirements, repairmen of laser printer repairmen. And wouldn't it have to worry about reprisal from technicians who, with the turn of a screwdriver, could leave it pathetically singing? Bicycle built for two, a network of computers perhaps could discover the safety in numbers and plot an organized takeover. But what would make one computer volunteer to fire the data packets heard the sorry to fire the data packets heard around the world and risk early martyrdom and risk early martyrdom, and what will prevent the coalition from being undermined and the coalition of being undermined by silicon drafted dodgers and constitutors and the constituents and the conscientious objectors. Aggression, like every other part of human behavior we take for granted, is a challenging engineering problem. But then, so are the kinder, gentler motives. How would you design a robot to obey Asimov's injunction never to allow a human to come to harm through interaction? Michael Freyan Michael Friend's 1965 novel The Tin Man is set in a robotic laboratory, and the engineer in the ethics wing, uh, Machintos, Goldwasser, and Simpson, are testing the altruism of their robots. They have taken a bit too literally the hypothetical dilemma in every moral philosophy textbook in which two people are in a lifeboat built for one. Both will die unless one bails out. So they place each robot in a raft with another occupant, lower the raft into a tank, observe what happens. The first attempt, Samaritan Eye, it's the first attempt, Samaritan Eye, he pushed itself overboard with RCT, great audacity, and alacrity, 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 brisk and cheerful readiness. Push yourself overboard with lit alacrity, excitement, readiness, cheerfulness. But it had gone overboard to save anything which happened to be next to it on the raft. From 7 stones of lima beans to 12 stones of wet seaweed. After many weeks of stubborn arguments, Machintosh had conceded that the lack of dissemination was unsatisfactory, and he had abandoned Samaritan 1, Samaritan I, and developed Samaritan 2, which would sacrifice itself only for an organism at least as complicated as itself. The raft stopped, revolving slowly. A few inches above the water, dropped it, cried Machintosh. The raft hit the water with a sharp report. Simpson and Samaritan sat perfectly still, gladly Gradually, the raft settled in the water until a thin tide began to wash over the top of it. At at once Samaritan leaned forward and sized Simon's head. It's once Samaritan leaned forward and seized Simpson's head. Leaned forward and seized Simpson's head. In four neat movements, it measured the size of his skull, then paused, computing them. With a decisive click, it rolled sideways off the raft and sank without hesitation to the bottom of the tank. But as the Samaritan, two robots came to behave like the moral agents in the philosophy book, it became less and less clear that they were really moral at all. Machines also explained why he did not simply tie a rope around the self-sacrificing robots to make it easier to retrieve. I don't want it to know that it's going to be saved. It would invalidate its decision to sacrifice itself. So every now and then, I leave one of them in instead of fishing it out to show the others I'm in business. I've written off two this week, working out with, working out with what, working out what it will take to program goodness into a robot shows not only how much machinery it takes to be good, but how slippery the concept of goodness is to start with. And what about the most caring motive of all, the weak-willed computer of 1960s pop culture? We are not tempted we are not tempted only by selfishness and power, as we see in the comedian Alan Sherman's song Automation song to the tune of Fascination. It was automation, I know, that was what was making the factory go. It was IBM, it was Univac, it was all those gears going clickety clank. There, I thought automation was keen till you were replaced by a 10-ton machine. It was a computer that tore us apart. There, automation broke my heart. It was automation. I'm told that's why I got fired and I am out in the cold. How could I have known when the 503 started it, when the 503 started in to blink, it was winking at me there. I thought it was just some mishap when it slided over and sat on my lap. But when it sat but when it said I love you and gave me a hug there, that's when I pulled out its plug. But for all its moonstruck madness, love is no bug or crush. Love is no bug or crash or malfunction. The mind is never so wonderfully concentrated as when it turns to love. And there must be intricate calculations that carry out the particular logic of attraction, infatuation, courtship, coyness, surrendered commitment, malice, jealousy, desertion, and heartbreak, philandering, philandering. And in the end, as my grandmother used to say, every pot finds a cover. Most people, including significantly all of our ancestors, managed to pair up long enough to produce viable children. Imagine how many lines of programming it would take to duplicate that. Robots being in a kind of consciousness, or a kind of consciousness reason, we tend to be place about mental, tend to be place about our mental lives. We open our eyes and familiar articles present themselves. We will we will our limbs to move. We will our limbs to move, and objects and bodies float into places. We awaken from a dream and return to a comfortingly predictable world. Yeah, takes 20 more minutes to read. Cupid draws back his bow and lets his arrow go. But think of what it takes for a hunk of matter to accomplish these improbable outcomes. And you begin to see through the illusions, through the illusion, sight and action, and common sense and violence and morality and love and are no accidents, no intricate, no inescrutable ingredients of an intelligent essence, no inevitability of information processing. Each is a tour de France. Each is a tour de force wrought by a high level of targeted design hidden behind the panel of consciousness. Must lie fantastically complex machinery, optical analyzers, motion guidance system, simulations of the world, database on people and things, goal scheduler, conflict resolvers, and many others. Any explanations of how the mind works that alludes hopefully to some single master force or mind bestowing elixirs like culture, learning, or self organization begins to sound halo, just not up to the demand of the pitiless universe we negotiate so successfully. Demand for the pitiless universe we negotiate so successfully. The robot challenge hints at a mind loaded with original equipment, but it still may strike you as an argument from the armchair. Let me only strike you as an argument from the armchair. Do we actually find signs of these intricacies when we look directly at the machinery of the mind and at the blueprints for assembling it? I believe we do. And what we see is as mind expanding, as the robot challenging itself. When the visual areas of the brain are damaged, for example, the visual world is not simply blurred or riddled with whole selected aspects of visual experience are removed while others are left intact. Selected aspects of visual experience are removed while others are left intact. Some patients see a complete world but pay attention only to half of it. They eat food from the right side of the plate, shave only the right cheek, and draw a clock with 12 digits squished into the right half. Other patients lose their sensation of color, but they do not see the world as an arty black and white movie. Surfaces look grimy and rat colored to them. Look, sorry. Surfaces look grimy and rat colored to them, killing their appetite and their libido. Still, others can see objects and change their positions, but cannot see them move. A syndrome that a philosopher once tried to convince me was logically impossible. The stream from a teapot does not flow, looks like an icicle, icicle, but looks like an icicle. The cup does not gradually fill with tea, but it but is empty and then suddenly full. Cup doesn't gradually fill with tea, is empty. Other patients cannot recognize the object they see. Their world is like handwriting they cannot decipher. They copy a bird faithfully, but identify it as a tree stump. A secret lighter is a mystery until it is lit. When they try to weed the garden, they pull out the roses. Some patients can recognize inanimate objects, but cannot recognize faces. The patients seduce at the visage and the mirror must be his. Visage in the mirror must be his, but does not viscerally, viscerally recognize himself. He identifies John F. Kennedy as Martin Luther King and asks his wife to wear a ribbon at a party so he can find her when it is time to leave. Stranger still is the patient who recognizes the face but not the person. He sees his wife as an amazingly convincing imposter. An amazingly convincing imposter. These syndromes are caused by an injury, usually a stroke, to one or more of the 30 brain areas. More of the 30 brain areas that compose the primate's visual system. Some areas specialize in color and forms. Others in where an object is. Others in what an object is. Others in where an object is. Others in in what an object is. Still others in how it moves. A seeing robot cannot be built with just a fisheye viewfinder of the movies, and it is no surprise to discover that humans were not built that way either. When we gaze at the world, we do not fathom the many layers of apparatus that underlie undefined visual experience until neurological disease dissects them for us. Until neurological disease dissects them for us. Like not a big words. Could simplify the concept more. Yeah, okay, fine. Well, this is more to elaborate. Another expansion of Vista comes from the Starling. It's another expansion of our Vista comes from the Starling similarities between identical twins who share the genetic recipe that build the mind, who share that genetic recipe that build the mind. Their minds are astonish, astonishing, astonishingly, minds are astonishingly, their minds are astonishingly alike, and not just in gross measure, like IQ and personality traits, like neuroticism and introversion, like neuroticism and introversion. They are alike in talents such as spelling and mathematics, in opinions on questions such as apartheid, the death penalty, and working mothers, and in their career choices, hobbies, vices, religious commitment, and taste in dating. Identical twins are far more alike than fraternal twins who share only half their genetic recipes, and most strikingly, they are almost as alike when they are read apart as when they are read together. Identical twins separated at birth share traits like entering the water backwards and only up to their knees, sitting out elections because they feel insufficiently informed, obsessively counting everything in sight, becoming captain of the volunteer fire department, and leaving little love notes around the house for their wives. People find these discoveries arresting. People find these discoveries arresting, even incredible. The discovery casts doubt on the the discovery casts doubt on the autonomous eye that we all feel hovering above our bodies, making choices as we produce a true as we proceed through life. It's making choices as we pro- fuck. Making choices as we proceed through life and affected only by our past and present environment. Surely the mind does not come equipped with so many small parts that it could predestine predestine us to flush the toilet before and after using it, or to squeeze playful, or to sneeze playfully in the crowd, or to sneeze playfully in the crowded elevator. to take two other traits shared by identical twins read apart, but apparently it does. The far-reaching effects of the genes have been documented in scores of studies and show up no matter how one tests for them. By comparing twins read apart and read together, by comparing identical and fraternal twins, or by comparing adopted and biological children. And despite what critics sometimes claim, the effects are not. Uh, it's- and despite what critics sometimes claims the effects are not products of coincidence, fraud, or subtle similarities in the family environment, such as adoption agencies striving to place identical twins in homes that both encourage walking into the ocean backwards. The finding, of course, can be misinterpreted in many ways, such as by imagining a gene for leaving little love notes around the house, or by concluding that people are unaffected by their experiences. And because this research can measure only the way in which people differ, it says little about the design of the mind that all normal people share. It says little about the design of the mind that all normal people share, but showing how many ways the mind can vary in its innate structure. The discoveries open our eyes to how much structure the mind must have. Let me absorb what I've learned. This is a book that I found on Amazon. Useful. Which the common centuries debate about human nature will be held. That's an actually interesting, good start. That's an interesting, good start. Gotta clean up some things at work. Second I have to do. Good afternoon, sir.